Sephora stores are everywhere you are. So just pop in. When you need a brown lip to match your 90s playlist. A confidence boost before your interview? Or a last-minute gift for mom's birthday. There's always a Sephora near you. Just pop in. Use our store locator to find your local Sephora or Sephora at Kohl's.
Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Midnight Mass. I'm Andreou. I wanted to put some thoughts together on the row about donations, gifts and hospitality, and I wanted to do it in this solo format because I find social media a really toxic place on this particular issue. Something about the combination of far-right blue ticks who will basically never forgive Starmer for crushing the racist riots, excitable journalists who will never forgive Starmer for being a bit dull, and a load of super dramatic people on the left who will never forgive Starmer for not being Corbyn, makes social media about as conducive to clarifying thoughts on this as having one's head dipped in concrete. So this is partly for my benefit because I will use it to work my way through the argument. I plan to take advantage of the medium to get you to listen, hopefully, for more than 360 characters at a time and without the inducement of saying something glib in reply to the first half of a sentence before hearing the second half, in exchange for the dopamine of likes from a self-selected following. And I know of what I speak. I do that a lot. I have rarely seen a debate framed in such flawed, exaggerated and muddled terms. And I think there are three driving forces behind this. The first is that we have a comically unserious top tier of political journalists, in my view. There are exceptions and they are notable, but they are few in the top tier. Most of them have spent the last 14 years in a scandal-rich environment with their volume permanently on 11, where they filled all the airtime and all the column inches they wanted with anonymous briefings, court intrigue, screen grabs of WhatsApp groups, you know who you are, and very little actual journalism. For some, it is all they have ever known. Suddenly the environment is different, leaner, the stories chewier, more policy-related, the personalities less colourful, the majority much more secure, the context less helpful. But their media bosses still expect the same clicks, the same volume, the same primary colours, the same engagement. So what happens is a wafer-thin slice of ham becomes a feeding frenzy for weeks. I agree fully with Tom Baldwin, who told Kay Burley he was getting a bit fed up of journalists reading the public register of interests and acting like they were Woodward and Bernstein, the journalists who broke Watergate. Added to this, we are seeing a huge imbalance in the press, I'm afraid, as I worried there would be before the election and discussed it a few times. The rump of it is still right-wing and looking to stick it to the government. Added to that, the few more moderate or even progressive publications and journalists also take pride from sticking it to the government because it's as if they're saying, look how unimpeachable we are, we're sticking it to our own side. But they end up overcompensating wildly and going in studs up. So when there was a scandal 2 years ago, let's say, you had a significant proportion of the media actively working with the government to change the subject, pushing against the narrative, trying to move the story on, kick a bit of dust, do a little bit of look over there. Now, there is basically The Guardian getting a righteous hard-on from bashing Labour, and the Sun going, see, even the Guardian is outraged. And so even a non-story rolls on indefinitely for lack of something else to provide those clicks. An editor once said to me, once you cotton on to the idea that there is all this dead air, this empty column space, every day it sort of renews, it re-empties, and somehow needs filling, this merciless vacuum that must be fed every hour of every day. Then the stories you see begin to make much more sense. Something will get an all caps headline every morning on every front page, whether it requires all caps or not. Now, the second force pushing behind this is a big group of people from within Labour who are upset at Labour anyway, or at least this version of Labour. Starmer's cardinal sin is that he's not Corbyn. He is someone who has dirtied himself by winning power. I don't think anything can ever placate this group. Everything is expressed in the most extra terms imaginable. What's your favorite activity? Someone asked me the other day. Killing hungry children, freezing pensioners, or committing genocide in Gaza. This group is not just exceptionally moral, but also as thrifty as it is confident. They are of the view that 160 grand a year is plenty to be buying suits for yourself and formal frocks for your wife for the roughly 100 public occasions that she will need to attend. That the PM and his wife should spend some time on eBay or in their local Oxfam because, the person talking found a brilliant Jaeger skirt there for £7 only the other day, so off you go, Victoria. Or that, in any case, it would show great strength of character if she just went out wearing an old M&S pair of knickers made into a hat, because people would appreciate her thriftiness. They are better people than me, is all I can say. If I knew I would be snapped every time I left the house, and a number of hostile national papers would splash me on their front page and pick me apart if there was so much as a button hanging loose, I would take every donation going to look my best, and then some. I would suggest that the paradigm of Sarah Brown, Gordon Brown's wife, points to our society not being quite as celebratory of thrift and character as some want to believe. She was monstered for years for looking plain or dowdy. Then, when she got a makeover and started using a service that loaned out designer clothes, she was flamed for bringing shame to Britain by wearing hand-me-downs. Not to say that I don't look at the itemised bill and think, Jesus, £300 for a pair of glasses is outrageous. I do. But I also know from experience how these things work. Starmer does not strike me as the sort of person that sat there flicking through a catalogue of eyewear and decided to pick the most expensive ones. I suspect what happened was that the election was called unexpectedly early, so time may have been limited. A Labour peer and long-time donor and friend, Lord Ali, who has links to the fashion industry, said to the top team, "Don't worry, I will kit you out to the nines." Starmer said, "Thanks, that would be great." Some stylist came in with several racks of suggestions. Stuff was tried, stuff was chosen, several of each thing would have been sent out to facilitate the craziness of their campaign, during which they crisscross the country for 16 hours every day, but still have to look crisp and perfect. And then the cost only got tallied up when it came time to declare it all. And I am sorry if this upsets you, but that seems to me a perfectly efficient way to go about it when you are time poor. You don't want the top team dedicating time to going to Oxfam or looking on eBay or buying dresses from M&S and worrying about it. You want someone like Lord Ali to come in and just take that aspect off their hands.
Quiet, Riot.
The third force behind this nothing of a story, in my view, is that it suits a conservative right-wing agenda. What's new, you might ask? You would expect them to attack Labour. But here's the thing. It is not just being used to attack Labour, not even primarily used for that. It is being used mainly, and perhaps more importantly, as a tool to reframe their own rule-breaking and venality of the last decade through completely false equivalence. This is especially so for Johnson fans, both individuals and newspapers. There is a huge effort to whitewash BoJo's failure hanging on this peg. So do be careful what you amplify. One of the most common responses I have seen in the last couple of weeks has been basically along the lines of Starmer and your lot hounded Boris for a bit of cake / some wallpaper / PPE contracts, so now you're getting it in return. Or people suggesting it's okay when your side does it, is it? But what is the it in this case? Johnson didn't get in trouble for a bit of cake. He got in trouble for breaking the rules that he imposed on the rest of us under pain of criminal sanction during a deadly pandemic. The gold wallpaper, or the holiday in Marbella, or Mystique, or the loans arranged over dinner, or the 27 grand's worth of luxury food smuggled into Downing Street, were a problem for Johnson because they weren't declared and wouldn't have been declared ever if they hadn't been discovered. As for PPE contracts, as so many of the scandals of the last few years, they involved public money being handed out to questionable donors. In contrast, what we're discussing here is about private money being used to give a team a makeover. This is essential context. If you have somehow arrived at the conclusion that following the rules and breaking the rules are somehow the same thing, or that accepting a gift paid for by private money and making a private gift of public money are somehow equivalent, you have been profoundly misled by all the noise. Nothing can change what those three groups think that I mentioned. But they do make the weather, and this affects a fourth group, who do read all this stuff and feel genuinely upset and disappointed because they expected better. This phrase keeps coming up in my interactions. We expected better. They think donations and gifts stink. They are a way to gain access to power. And that is fair enough. I think that is a fair enough view to hold. There is no doubt that this is not a great look for a new government. There is no doubt that Labour could have dealt with it 100 times better. I have vocally campaigned for the system of donations to be overhauled for almost 20 years now. It is toxic, it is dysfunctional. But let's have that conversation. The only reason we are debating this dress or that pair of glasses is because Labour have been completely transparent and done everything by the book. It seems to me irrational to punish them because we wish the book were different. Let's not create perverse incentives for less transparency. Let's not make Johnson look like the wise guy for hiding it all and not declaring it unless he was caught, because if you're going to get crucified anyway, you may as well limit your exposure? Would it have been better if Lord Ali just provided one large cash donation that was then used as a clothing allowance away from the public glare? It seems strange to me to expect just one party to go into an election campaign with one hand tied behind its back, on grounds invented by its own supporters. To expect politicians not to accept every hospitality going during a campaign where the aim is actually to be seen at as many events as possible and talk to as many people as possible. Nobody seemed to mind when Corbyn accepted hospitality from Glastonbury. What's the difference? I mean, do we think that aloof, elusive, badly dressed candidates would fare better? I don't think anyone thinks they would. So the question is, how do we finance that? If we decide as a country that donations are not the right way to fund our politics, let's find the right way to fund our politics. Let's change the system, but for everyone. Because otherwise we make politics accessible to people like Sunak and his wife, who have $500 million in the bank, but quite inaccessible to people like the young Angela Rayner or the young Mary Black. So let's have that conversation. Let's change the system for everyone. And let's be prepared for this probably involving public money being diverted from other public services. But I think it's completely fair to press for a change to this system. What is not fair is to act as if change should have happened magically, unilaterally, and yesterday, and politicians must be judged by rules not as they are, but as we would prefer them to be. The same week, that the great saga of who paid for Victoria Starmer's blouse broke, Transparency International published a report that found 30.7 billion worth of contracts were awarded by the last administration outside any normal competition or procurement rules, and that 135 PPE contracts with at least 3 red flags indicating potential corruption worth £15.3 billion. That is actual public money going to so-called VIPs with zero transparency and breaking every rule. It got coverage in not a single newspaper that I can find. So let us, for heaven's sake, keep some perspective before forming the circular firing squad that people like Farage, Braverman and Badenoch are praying we form. Thank you all so much for listening. If you appreciate our hard work, even if you disagree, please log on to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and support us with a one-off donation or a small monthly stipend. We will be discussing all of this much more in the full show that will be out Friday morning this week, because we're waiting for Naomi to come back from Labour conference. Have a great, great day. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canellu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet.